Okay, folks, we're back at it, and the next speaker up is Carson, and she's studying what I consider one of the most fascinating fish in the sea, the Mola or the ocean sunfish. Looking forward to it. Hi, Carol.
Hi, can you see my screen?
We're all set.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. Let me know if there's any issues at your end. I appreciate you letting me zoom in. It's been a crazy week up here, and I'm very excited to talk to you about our work with ocean sunfish. I'm going to go really fast through the slides because I have a lot of really neat videos that I want you to see. And so if you have any questions, just let me know at the end. I started NECWA about 20 years ago, and our main project was NebShark, a community sighting network for live basking sharks and ocean sunfish. As a whale biologist, and that's where I get my nickname, I'm a little shrimp, we see them on the whale watching boats all the time. So I thought, that's really great. Let's start a sighting network that'll do two things. That'll get people in our area connected to these animals, but it will also give us a little information about where they are and what they're doing. So I started this program on the whale watching boats for live happy animals in mind. What I didn't expect was to have reports of stranded animals, both live and dead. Nobody told me that was going to happen. So the stranding overview, what I've learned over these 20 years is that strandings for any species can happen any time of the year. But on the Cape, the majority of strandings for many different types of marine wildlife are September through December. That's the annual stranding season. And there's a number of issues why animals strand. Could be navigational issues, could be issues with winds and currents, vessel strikes, fishery interactions, and cold stunning events. Now,
Hey,
as you know,
Carol, this is Mike.
hi Mike,
Any chance you can do full screen?
I am full screen at my end.
Okay.
Uh, Hang on, I'm not good at this stuff. Let's see. You enter full screen, and then how's that, Mike? Any better?
Yeah, that's the same. So I guess that's the way we'll have to go with it.
Okay, sorry about that. We tried to test it out earlier. Anyway, so as we all know, the Cape is, kind of sticking out there 60 miles into the Atlantic Ocean, acts like a really big geographical trap. And it's 20 miles deep, 20 miles wide. It's very difficult for any animal to try to navigate this. And many animals in the fall are trying to head out of our cold New England waters. They can deal with cold waters, but not prolonged cold temperatures. Unfortunately, when they come into Cape Cod Bay, not only is the Cape a trap, but there's two additional traps. One is Great Island and Wellfleet Harbor. The second one is Long Point and Provincetown. So even if they start to move out of Cape Cod Bay, they can experience other issues. Of course, bathymetry is a big issue. On the northern shores of the Cape, you can have 1, 2, 3 miles of sand flats when the tide goes out. Very hard for any animal to navigate in a situation like that, and it can happen really quickly. Wind and current events can push these animals onto the beaches, and they really can't fight those currents for very long. That quite often happens on the outside of the Cape. And then this video was given to me by Scott Landry, who works with Stormy in the Center for Coastal Studies. And this poor ocean sunfish got tangled up in a lobster pot, and Scott was able to disentangle the fish, save the fish, and save the gear. But it's really crazy how that fish got itself into that situation. We also have issues with vessel strikes. You can see the animal on the left has a series of propeller cuts, and later in the season, like many other animals, including sea turtles, we do have cold stunning events for fish like ocean sunfish. Unfortunately, nobody wants a 600-pound ocean sunfish to rehab, so unfortunately, those fish don't make it. Now, this is a very unusual animal. In our waters, they're about 6 to 8 feet long. They're typically considered juveniles at that size. They eat jellyfish, ctenophores, a lot of gelatinous things. They are found worldwide, as you can see on the map. The red areas is where you would find these animals, but they are very coastal. They don't have too many predators. Once you get that big, 600 pounds, very few things really want to take you on. And they are listed as decreasing and vulnerable by the IUCN, though we don't really have a lot of good population data on the species. We don't fish them commercially, but they are fished as bycatch or targeted fishery in different parts of the world, including Asia. They are listed as the heaviest bony fish. And let me tell you, I don't know how you get this big by eating jellyfish. They start out as that cute little punk rocker on the right hand side with all those spines. And then they grow up into that big, beautiful animal. Now, this is an underwater video by Dr. John Chisholm, a friend of mine. He was out with Greg Scommel off of Monomoy on the Cape trying to find some basking sharks. They had just gotten a brand new GoPro and they tried it out on this ocean sunfish. What I love about this video is that you can see how the fish swims. Very different than other fish. Using that very tall dorsal fin, about 3 to 4 feet tall, and the very tall anal fin, the bottom fin, to move. And this is a powerful fish. Unless it's cold stunned, this fish has a lot of power. The tail, called the clovis, is just used as a rudder. So they basically use that tail just to push themselves around. You'll notice that the fish doesn't move away from the GoPro that's under the water or the boat. It actually comes over to check it out. And this is a very curious fish. A lot of people talk about how it'll come right over to their boat and take a couple laps around. But just a beautiful fish. Now, there has been some studies done. Dr. Inga Potter did some PAT tags, pop-up archival tags, which record water depth, water temperature, and light levels. She learned a lot of really interesting things. They tagged over 31 fish, and you can see from the graph that these fish need to head south in the winter. They spend the winters in their warm waters of the United States or the Caribbean. Their dive profile is also very interesting. They spend 30% of their time in the top 10 meters of the water column, 80% of their time in the top 200 meters, and their maximum dive depth recorded on these PAT tags was over 844 meters, which is almost 3,000 feet. They have a very narrow range for temperature preferences, anywhere between 42 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is why they head south in the winter, spending time in deep water, low latitudes, not spending much time at or near the surface. In 2018, NECWA was working with Coonamessett Farm Foundation, and they had a couple extra sea turtle satellite tags. And so I went out with them, and we satellite tagged 2 ocean sunfish that were in Cape Cod Bay in September. And the 2 different fish were able to get out of Cape Cod Bay. So that's good. If they're stuck in Cape Cod Bay, we know that they can get out. And one went to Canada and went feeding up in Canadian Maritimes. The other one headed past Nantucket, and then the satellite tags either popped off, or stopped transmitting. Oh, sorry, went the wrong way. Now, this is really interesting, and this is right in your hometown. I was contacted by Mike about a rescue on the north shore of Shelter Island this past November, and the sighting was first reported by Mark, and then the animal control officer, Jenny Zahler, was able to get in the water and rescue this fish. And she needed some additional help because the fish got stuck twice. And a local person with a rowboat, James Cummings, helped out as well. If you're in the audience, I just want to say thank you very much. But I saw an article in the newspaper, and what I loved about what Officer Zahler said is that this fish was so big it was like a giant pancake. And they really are. They don't flex very much. But the second part is what I've heard from a lot of different people. And it really hits home because this is why we do the work we do. NECWA is an all volunteer nonprofit. We don't get paid to do this kind of work. It is a labor of love. And she said it was in some way a religious experience. And this huge eye looking at me the whole time I like to think we connected, and I hear that a lot from people who try to help these animals. And here's
What
Mark's
the heck is
video. This is what you often see.
Mola, is it not?
And this animal just made a wrong turn. It's in shallow water,
It is.
and now it doesn't know how to get out. And it's not able to right itself. And luckily, Mark found it just in the nick of time, and they were able to get it back into deep water. There's a lot of different rescue techniques you can use when you're desperate. We call it the grab and go technique. You jump in the water, grab the fish, and pull. They're like boats. As long as they have some water under them, you can move them, even a big fish, very easily. But it's best to use a strap or a rope if you're trying to drag a fish out of a bad area. It's a little easier, and you always want to pull up. You don't push these animals. You can tow them next to the boat. It's very slow. It can take you hours to get the fish where it needs to go. And so it's not the best technique, but if that's all you have, that's what you use. Now, thank goodness for Facebook, we had a very large ocean sunfish stuck for 3 days in a cove in Buttermilk Bay in Bourne. Here's Billy Joe, one of our volunteers, using a kayak to try to push this fish into shallow water. We can't really do much with a ocean sunfish if it's in deep water, but in shallow water we can jump in and kind of manhandle them. And here Billy Joe and I are trying to figure out how to save this fish. All we have are 2 ropes, and on Facebook we put an alert out asking for help. 2 fishermen showed up. They have never done this before, and we spent about 20 minutes trying to figure out how to safely tie this fish up to their boat so they could tow it to the Cape Cod Canal. And it was an incredible experience. And here you can see where the fish was caught in the cove for 3 days, and they basically put the fish right under the boat, tow it to the Cape Cod Canal for release. So thank goodness for Facebook and the community. Now, what we've learned is that these fish are not used to shallow water, and they're not used to tides. This is a pelagic ocean going fish. And so quite often, if they're in shallow water, they will turn around as long as their anal fin hits the bottom, even if you're pushing them in the right direction. So it's really important that you get in the water, or you get a kayak or a boat, and you keep herding that fish in the direction you need to go. You can also just get in a kayak and get behind them. This is Amy. She's just kayaking behind the ocean sunfish. You can see the sculling pattern of the tall dorsal fin. She's just moving the animal out of a bad area that's going to go dry when the tide goes out. And then we found that kayakers are really your first responders. They can get into shallow water, they can get into the marshes, they can get into areas where you really don't want to bring a boat, and they're your first line of defense. Once they grab the fish, what we also found out is that we use hula hoops with pool noodles, and we secure the ocean sunfish in that apparatus. And what that does is that it allows the fish to still pump water over the gills, because it kind of sinks them in the hula hoop, but it allows us to manhandle them. And you can quite often just kayak them where you need to go. And the video is from a drone. We have 2 kayakers tandem, and they're desperately pulling that very large ocean sunfish out of a bad area in Wellfleet Harbor. Now you can tow the hula hoop behind the boat,
Okay.
but again, you have to go very slow. Sometimes the ocean sunfish try to help you, but you can also tow them on the hip. And that again requires you to go very slow. But we've been able to get fish 2, 3, 4 miles back into Cape Cod Bay or back into the Cape Cod Canal, giving these animals another chance. We've tried to think of better ways, more efficient ways, safer ways of moving these big fish. So I thought about taking a lily pad, adding a tow bar, and then basically being able to plane and get this fish out of the water and actually be able to go not 2 knots, but 5 knots. Yay. The problem with that is you have to keep water in the fish's mouth. And we haven't figured out how to do that very well. So somebody has to babysit the fish while we're towing to make sure that the saltwater hose stays in the mouth. So here's a little montage I just put together really quick.
Good idea. What
The
she's
kayaks are coming.
came up, Marissa.
Now Deliska is pulling the fish onto the lily pad, still in the hula hoop. We're moving around the Wellfleet Pier. We're going to be picking up speed, and it's like a Nantucket sleigh ride. Until you can get that fish into deep water, as far as you can go,
The short.
then you're going to release the animal and wish it well and hope that it makes it.
Very nice job.
If the animal strands out of the water, then you're really in trouble because then you really have to, use a lot of muscle. Now you've got 300, 400, 500 pounds of dead weight. They were able to rescue this fish, but it's not a situation that you want to be in. You want to get to these fish before this happens. This is one of the 2019 rescues. A friend of mine, Blair Perkins, who's a fisherman and a naturalist and lives on Nantucket, called me about an ocean sunfish that had weaseled its way all the way into Nantucket Harbor, right where the start part is, 7.5 miles in. We tried to drag the fish next to the boat, but Blair was like, it's going to take me hours to get this fish to the mouth of the harbor. So because it was a fishing boat, Blair had a block and tackle and a winch. I had a really strong machine strap, and we were able to pick the fish up for the first time and put it in the boat. And then here you can see we're trying to keep its mouth, and we're hanging on for dear life. Now Blair can go as fast as possible. And instead of taking 2-3 hours to get to the mouth of the harbor, it took us 20 minutes. We picked the fish up, put him back in the water, and he went in the right direction. And Blair and his team are incredible. Here's a rescue in 2024 where he had to back down his truck, lower his lift gate, and get the fish on there. And then they basically drove the fish through the center of Nantucket to the other side for release. So there are many different ways that you can move a mola, but this was a very unique way that I don't think anyone has ever tried. And then when they got to the other side, they just backed it down. And Blair said he didn't even know who this guy was, but he was great. And they basically released the fish and it went on its way. They can live for about 10 minutes out of the water, so you don't have a lot of time unless you're pumping water over the gills. If the animals are dead or they don't make the rescue attempt, then as good marine biologists, we switch gears and we collect internal and external information. And most of the strandings, as you can see with this 2020 stranding chart, are in the northern shores of the Cape. They're getting caught in Wellfleet Harbor, in Long Point, they're getting caught in Brewster and Orleans, in those areas where there are shallow flats. And even if they can get to the Cape Cod Canal, sometimes they don't make it through. But these types of community sighting networks are critical because one person reported in 2020 a unique type of ocean sunfish that we don't see very often called the sharptail. And that was, at that point in time, the first sighting of a sharptail in New England waters. Then I started thinking about some of the reports that were coming in on our community sighting network. And I remember this report that came in earlier that year by a John O'Brien. Now, John O'Brien was in Rhode Island. He rescued this ocean sunfish. It took him 3 tries, but the animal had been pushed in by the current and tides, and he basically walked it out past the surf, and off it went. And I started to second guess myself looking at this fish, and I realized it wasn't a common mola, the ocean sunfish that we deal with. It was a sharp-tailed mola. What you can't see is the extension on the back part of the tail where they get the common name because it's under John's arm. But here's the second sharp-tailed mola reported in New England as far as we know. It's very exciting. Now this is the stranding data that we've collected. We started in 2008 responding to calls about stranded animals. I live in Middleborough. I drive about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to these animals. And you can see from 2008 to 2012, numbers were going up to almost 40 strandings per year. Now, of course, some of that increase was due to people realizing there's crazy people out there willing to do something even though they don't know what they're doing. But notice what happened in 2013. Numbers dropped down to almost a 2008 level, and then they've gone back up. 2014 was the big sea turtle year on the Cape where we had over 1,400 sea turtles strand, but it wasn't a big year for ocean sunfish, which is interesting. Our biggest year was 2019. Almost 160 animals hit the beach. And it's getting worse and better as we go on. We don't know what the trend is going to be. If the animals strand dead, of course, we're going to collect some external information, sighting information, date, time, general location, GPS position, weight. We have portable tripods with crane scales and chain falls that we can use to weigh big fish. We take photographs, a series of body measurements, and then we collect external tissues, mucus, external parasites, plugs, skin plugs, and we tag the carcass because they will refloat on the next tide. They might even flip over. Then you can't even tell that you necropsied the animal. So we don't want to overcount the number of dead carcasses in the area. What I didn't realize, and again, I am a whale biologist, I am not a fisheries person, is that this is the most unusual fish you could have studied. They have very thin, rough skin, but underneath it, they have thick reticulated collagen, protein, hard as a rock. To a whale biologist, it reminds you of blubber, but it's not fat, it's not lipid, it's protein. And it's used, I assume, to protect this big fish. Because of this reticulated collagen, ocean sunfish have a reduced skeletal system, and even though they're classified as the heaviest bony fish, their bones are like cartilage. You can cut through them with a sharp knife. They don't have as much mineralization as most bones do. When we do a level B, if it's a fresh carcass, we have to open them up to determine sex. There's no external features to identify male and female, so you do have to open up the animals. We collect internal tissues for our research and to support the research of others, and we open up the whole digestive tract, take measurements, collect samples to figure out what these animals are eating when they're in our waters. And we take photographs and samples of lots of different kinds of structures, the gills. They have a huge oily liver, a big sac-like bladder, a massive eye about the size of an orange. They have pharyngeal gill teeth, one of the hardest structures on this fish in the upper throat, probably used to shred and move the jellyfish down into the stomach, a huge gallbladder and spleen, and here you can see part of the digestive tract. Will open up that whole digestive tract to document what we find. Here's Bob Prescott, just retired director of Mass Audubon, helping. We record and collect all the internal and external parasites. In fact, this fish is said to have the highest number of parasites of any fish in the oceans. And I thought, heaviest bony fish. I've done some fisheries work with friends. We could collect the otoliths, these calcified structures in the inner ears, and we could section them like you can do with cod and haddock, and you can see this ring or banding pattern, and we could then determine how old these animals are. Ha ha ha, little did I know, because they do not have a calcified skeletal system. You can see I opened up the skull. You grab those strings that are hidden inside. You can pull out the otoliths, but when you section them, they are not calcified at all. So what's plan B? How are we going to age these animals? And I noticed in the vertebra there is banding pattern, and for some species of cartilaginous fish, they can use the vertebra's banding pattern in the centrum to estimate the age of the fish. So now we have hundreds of vertebra, and we're trying to ship them now to Taiwan. There's a researcher there who has used vertebra to age the shark-tailed mola, and she thinks she can use our vertebra to age our common mola. So we take lots of samples for our research and others. We've shipped stomachs to Canada, eyes to Florida, DNA, muscle, mucus, liver to Sweden, whatever people want, parasites to Georgia, anything that we can do to help people, help their research, and help support the knowledge and understanding of this very unusual fish. Again, there's no money really to support research, so unless you're doing this as a volunteer, you're not going to have access to this information. So the community, and I always forget to mention this as much as I really should, this is a community project. We couldn't do the work we do without the general public, people helping us by even just reporting an animal live or dead, or helping us with strandings. This is AmeriCorps. They were helping with a stranding of a very large dead female in Buttermilk Bay, and taking photos, collecting tissues. All of this is so important to us, and we want to thank everyone for their assistance over the years. So thank you so much for having me. I hope you enjoyed the talk. Here's my contact information, and if you need me at any point in time, 7 days a week, feel free to call me. We are always here to do whatever we can for these animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We'll take a question if anyone has a question for Carol. Well, she's still with us. Anybody out there? Yeah. Carol, how many species are there of this particular organism? You mentioned 2.
5.
There's 5.
Right now.
Okay.
They just found the hoodwinker on the other coast, and so I think we're going to probably find 1 or 2 more as we do a little bit more exploring and observations.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And Carol is very passionate, so if you want to get in touch with her, she will actually, reply to you. I was lucky enough to be up in the Provincetown, just down the block from Stormy's house, actually, and found out that there was a Mola that washed up on the beach nearby. Ran down there to check it out, and along comes Carol and helped her make all the measurements and watch the whole necropsy. It's pretty cool. They're amazing fish to me. Thank you again, Carol.
Thanks, guys, for having me. Have a wonderful rest of your conference.
Great, thanks.
Bye, guys.